Hello, I welcome you all to the next unit on readings on Indian diversity and literary movements at Hansraj e-Samvaad. My name is Piyush Chaudhary and I teach at the Department of English at Hansraj College, University of Delhi. We are in the midst of the ongoing lecture series on readings on Indian diversity, and today we'll begin with a new unit of our syllabus, that is writings in English. This unit contains one essay and a couple of poems and one short excerpt from a novel. Today, firstly, we'll discuss an essay by Professor MK Naik. In this essay, he touches on the highly, what you can say, controversial and problematic and rather disputed relationship between Indian literature as a whole and Indian English literature as an element of it. This topic has been of wide debate since centuries, and MK Naik, in this essay, and the name of the essay is Indian Pride and Indian Prejudice, tries to discuss the different schools of thoughts around this particular debate. What is better? Is Indian English literature authentic or is Indian literature authentic? But then what is Indian literature? Right? So these are some of the questions that we'll be discussing it. So if I try to summarize it in very short, MK Naik says, firstly, that Indian literature is one big large chunk, one big large unit, and Indian writing in English is the youngest member of this family. And by using this analogy, he tries to comment on the problematic relationship that Indian English literature has and the debates that surround Indian English literature, where there are several critics who believe that Indian English literature is not genuine. Nayak calls this as a misplaced remark. He says that this is not real, this is not true, this is not factually correct. He says that IEL or Indian English literature can also be genuine literature. So therefore, this is an this is an essay in defense of IEL, Indian English literature. MK Naik also says that, firstly, he says that Indian literature has a long history, and within this space of Indian literature, there are literatures in several languages: Tamil, Kannada, Malayalam, Hindi, Telugu, so on and so forth. There are so many languages. They're all great literatures, but so is Indian English literature as well. In this large joint family, Indian English literature is the youngest brother, which is just somewhere close to 250 or perhaps 300 years old. It is the youngest brother in this huge family, right? So, this is the analogy that he gives again and again, right? So, Professor Nayak has also helped us to understand the various issues related to English, Indian English literature. English is, as we all know, considered to be a second language because it is not the original language of India. And the association of English language in India is just a matter of some 3 centuries. But in the past 2 to 3 centuries, English has gained huge inroads. So basically, this essay by Nayak focuses on Indian writing in English and its importance in our literary and cultural lives. There is always a debate whether Indian English literature is authentic or not. Today, this debate still goes on, and there are critics who believe that IEL is not authentic literature. And then there are critics who believe that IEL very well qualifies for authentic literature. For example, we have the case of Raja Rao, right, in the latter case. Similarly, MK Naik in this essay also makes a similar point that Indian English literature is as much Indian as is, say, Hindi or Kannada or Gujarati or Dogri or Tamil, Punjabi or any literature written in any regional language. In short, there are some major key takeaways and important points in this essay by Professor MK Naik. Firstly, the essay talks about regional Indian literature versus Indian English literature. It discusses which one is superior. You will get the answer to this when we read the entire essay. Secondly, the essay defends Indian English literature against its prejudiced image. That is why the title is Indian Pride and Indian Prejudice. Relationship between regional Indian literatures and Indian writing in English. So therefore, this essay is a defense against Indian English literature and it debunks certain myths associated with IEL. Nayak takes certain arguments both in favor of and both against IEL, and he debunks it with what you can call, with sort of a rational clarity. Let's now begin with the essay. So the essay begins. It opens with MK Nayak proclaiming that Indian English literature is basically, Indian literature is one joint family, and the youngest brother is IEL. And he also says that this has given rise to the notion that this youngest brother is a result of an unholy alliance between a white father and an Indian mother, and therefore is not a genuine member but rather a stepbrother, within the family of Indian literature. Further, MK Naik makes a very strong statement by saying, and I'm quoting it from the book, he says, This is because English today can no longer be regarded as a non native language in India. It is the first official language of at least one Indian state, Nagaland, while three Indian states, that is Manipur, Meghalaya, and Mizoram, there it is an associate official language. So basically, he is stressing on the language status of English, that even in India, English is a bridge language. It is used in several states in official or quasi official terms, right? Even today. So then, the next point that he makes is he talks about Buddhadev Bose's argument. Buddhadev Bose is a critic, and he said that Indian English literature is to be condemned, and he says that Indian English poetry is second grade. But then Nayak takes the example of Rabindranath Tagore, who won a Nobel Prize for writing, English poetry, right? So this proves that language matters less and content matters more. So if the content is authentic, then even IEL is authentic. The essay, as we all know, is written in defense of IEL. So here the author Naik is giving his arguments to defend IEL against critics such as Buddhadev Bose and several others. Then he also cites the example of, I can see here, Kantapura, written by Raja Rao. And I am quoting these lines from the text. Naik says, years later, Raja Rao said, as long as we are Indians, Indians of the Indian psyche, we shall have the English language with us and among us, and not as a guest or friend, but as one of our own, of our caste, of our creed, of our set of our tradition. So these lines that I just now read are written by Raja Rao in his preface to Kanthapura, his novel. I'll be coming to a detailed discussion on this preface in the subsequent lecture. It's also a part of your syllabus, so please, hold on for that. Another argument that several critics give is that English is far removed. It's a very distant language, and it makes no relation to any of the various languages that are there in India. But here Naik also debunks this argument by saying that Indian languages themselves are not very close to each other. For example, Kannada is very, very different from Marathi, and Kannada is itself very different from other Dravidian languages, right? So therefore, this argument is really, it doesn't hold any water. Then he also, citing the widespread recognition, the praise that IEL has garnered all over the world. Professor Naik, in a very humorous tone and in a very sarcastic tone, says these lines, and I'm quoting it. He says that if the proof of the pudding is in the eating, the Indo-Anglian dish has been eaten, savored up, and all over the world. Why should it be a taboo simply because it has been fried in British butter? Very interesting. What is British butter here? In this case, British butter means the British language, that is English language. So he says that Indian English language or Indian English literature has gained widespread recognition. Today, IEL has won accolades all over the world. Those writing originally in English have won huge recognition all over the world. Tagore won a Nobel Prize for that. And then why should we have a prejudice against IEL just because it is written in English? So therefore, the readers will notice that one by one, MK Naik is taking up various arguments against Indian English writings and Indian English literature, and then one by one he is debunking all of them. And he even says that novel as a form, novel as a genre itself came from the West. So going by this logic, even writing novels in India should be considered as an imitation and it should not be given any importance, right? But that is wrong. This is a wrong approach altogether, right? Because the novel itself is a Western product. So shall we stop writing novel in regional languages? No, we should not do that. So if writing a novel in regional language is considered acceptable, then why not writing a novel in English language considered acceptable? So this is another argument that MK Naik makes, for the critics who detest Indian literature, written originally in English, because they should then also detest the novelists who are writing, because the novel form itself is a Western form. Isn't this a very valid argument? Of course it is, right? Then the next point, he says that there are several critics who believe that uh, writing in English is primarily meant for Western audience, for more cosmopolitan audience, and so on and so forth. But this is again not true, and he gives next MK Naik gives the example of Mulk Raj Anand, who wrote the novel Untouchable, published in 1935, which was one of the first attempt by any Indian writer to deal with the idea of with the life of untouchables, with the problems of caste. It was a very important issue related to India only. So it cannot be just dismissed. IEL cannot be dismissed just for being written in a different language, in a foreign language. But at the same time, there are certain criticisms also against IEL that Mr. Naik makes, that Professor Naik makes. For example, he criticizes Salman Rushdie for being extremely distant from the day-to-day affairs and the normal everyday life of India. He criticizes Salman, Rushdie and IEL also for its elitist, for its elitist attitude. They believe that they are elites. He criticizes Salman Rushdie for being muddled in the colonial hangover. He criticizes him for his arrogance against Indian English literatures as well. Then he also criticizes IEL for its arrogance because they believe there are several authors who believe that they can look down upon regional literatures. That is why the name of the essay is Indian Pride and Indian Prejudice. So these writers who write in English consider themselves more educated just because they are able to speak in English. This is absolutely wrong. So he also criticizes and targets IEL wherever necessary for considering themselves superior than other regional literatures. Right? Naik says that both regional literature and Indian English literature should grow properly. Right? This is the idea that he makes. He also criticizes the arrogance of IEL. Right? And in fact, I would just quote one line so it'll make the point more clear. He says, even when an even more harmful gesture is the claim sometimes made on behalf of Indian writing in English that it is only Indian English writer who represents the Indian sensibility, while the regional writer can only speak for his fellow speakers alone. So, according to MK Naik, this is again arrogance on part of people who are supporters of Indian English literature, and they believe that only English literature can touch pan-Indian sensibility. But this is wrong, right? So he's not just blindly supporting Indian English literature, but Nayak is also criticizing Indian English literature. Towards the end, in the concluding sentences, Professor Nayak says that IEL should be considered as a blood brother of Indian literature. Look at these lines that I'm quoting once again. Nayak says, this youngster deserves to be treated not as a stranger or an intruder or an enemy, but as what he essentially is, a blood brother. So MK Naik ends this essay by calling Indian English literature or IEL as a blood brother of Indian literature. MK Naik says that Indian English literature is the newest member and he is still growing. So he's not criticizing the language at any point of time. If the content is authentic, then the literature is authentic, right? At the same time, he also understands that IEL, which is written originally in English, can reach a wider section of society. But it also carries a misfortunate birthmark, you can say so. And there is a certain prejudice against Indian literatures written originally in English. Because the torch bearers of Indian literature believe that it is written, it should not be written in a language which is not our own. It is a foreign language. It is a result of the cultural interconnectedness brought about by the British colonial rule. This is what critics of IEL believe. So there is a colonial hangover. This is what they say. So it is obviously there, but this is a matter of debate. So in this essay, we have debated, certain things in favor of IEL, certain things which goes against IEL, right? So, however, MK Naik, clearly mentions that it is authentic literature. He understands that it is a colonial hangover, and Indian English literature will always be looked at with doubtful eyes, but it is still doing a great job out there, right? People are writing good stuff in Indian English literature, right? We are winning multiple awards, Booker prizes, Nobel Prize has been won once. We are winning Booker prizes. We are doing good all over the world. Writers who are writing in English in India. So the essay ends here. Basically, we get an idea of MK Naik and his views on Indian English literature. So he wants to defend IEL, Indian English literature, against the attack of the critics who wrongly believe that it is inauthentic. On this note, I would end the lecture, and in the subsequent lectures, we'll be reading a poem. Uh, I'll be first doing Mother Tongue by uh, then we'll also be reading the preface to Kanthapura by Raja Rao, right? And then lastly, a poem, Passage to America by Ayappa Panikar, so, and Mother Tongue by Padma Sachdev. So these are the texts of this unit, and I will see you shortly in these subsequent lectures. Please stay tuned for more lectures of this GE. Thank you and goodbye. Jai Hind.